A lot of the time people reach out to me or they want to get coached is because they want to do something, but there's some type of fear that or a failure that's in the way. Anytime you do something, there's an inherent risk it's not going to work. I think your way of saying you can learn from it, and the only way of testing ideas out is by putting them out there to the world.
Thinking outside the box, creating extraordinary experiences and delivering what a team needs rather than what you think they want is exactly what this week's guest is all about. So strap yourself in and listen to this week's episode with the energising, optimistic and powerhouse of a woman, Leanne Hughes.
You don't want to be hanging out with me after a workshop. And often clients say, hey, come out for us day one, we'll go out for dinner. And I'm like, no, because I've left it all on the table.
The author of the 2-hour workshop blueprint and host of 2 popular podcasts where she shares tips, advice and insights to help listeners upskill and upscale.
When my mum said, Leanne, you need to start getting a bit more active. All I did was read books when I was young. I was actually quite shy.
You were shy?
Yeah. This is why it changed. This is how it changed.
Leanne, welcome to Share.
Steve, I'm so excited to see where this conversation will go. Thanks for having me as a guest.
No, it's been awesome. We've been in contact and it's going to be great to delve into some of your topics and all the things that you love.
Yeah, there's so many things. I mean, how much time do we have?
That's exactly right. And you seem like a very, very busy woman. You seem to be here, there, doing lots and lots of things. I don't know how you do it.
It's an illusion. Absolutely, it's an illusion. If you would actually follow me around, it's really not that interesting. I think, like all social media is kind of snippets and highlights and things like that. And I've had some friends over and my life is actually pretty boring, but I do love to bring in some contrast into, into the world.
Are you telling me you do actually sleep?
Yeah, I sleep. I love binging some Netflix shows. I love reading. I love just hanging out with the dogs and just going for walks. Yeah.
Cool.
So, which maybe just runs counterintuitive to a lot of maybe what you see, but I don't really buy into hustle culture, even though it sometimes seems like it, because what you're saying actually right now is a common, misperception of people have of me, that I'm so busy. But I make time for things that are important.
Yeah, no, that's great. Awesome. So like all of us, Leanne, we all have our kind of different versions and our kind of different chapters that we go through. Where did your story start?
Where does it start? I mean, if you could link it into today and the work that I do, but I think that really started from, if I go back to when I was 8 years old, if you're going back that far. But I remember going to a birthday party. It was for my friend's birthday, and my parents picked me up at the end of it. And in the car on the way home, I was like, that was the most boring birthday party I'd ever been to. We just kind of sat around and watched the parents. And it was different, kind of ran counterintuitive to all the birthday parties we had. My dad is an engineer, so we had these agended birthday parties with 120, pass the parcel, and we'd kind of just do all this stuff to make it a really great experience. And that kind of led into the work that I do around hosting workshops and group experiences and trying to make them non-boring, trying to just maximize the value of in-person group time. So that was kind of intrinsic to me. But I guess I've had a corporate career prior to starting my business in 2019, which included global consulting for Accenture, quarter life crisis, working for Wicked Camper Vans, which led me onto a really good path, as controversial as that role was. Lived in the northwest of Australia, in remote Australia, and I would highly recommend that to anyone. And then back into the global world of corporate mining, actually. So I love the different industries and different company sizes, different challenges as part of that.
Yeah, perfect. So as you were growing up and going through your youth, were there any kind of sliding door moments that kind of have shaped you into the person you are today?
Yeah, I think one of them definitely was when my mum said, Leanne, you need to start getting a bit more active. All I did was read books when I was young. I was actually quite shy. I just would read books and go to school.
You were shy?
Yeah, I was so shy. Yeah, but this is why it changed. This is how it changed. So she's like, we're going to sign you up to play netball. I'm like, no, I don't want to play a team sport. I hate netball. I never even had tried it. But they forced me to. I remember the tantrum that I had, a 30-minute tantrum. And I remember actually the first training session and actually just running to catch a ball. And I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. And that's when things definitely turned, because netball was a huge part of my life. I represented Queensland, I've represented Papua New Guinea, played at national level. And that's when I started coming out of my shell, actually,
Yep.
was through working with teams. That's why I love working with teams now because, yeah, of those great experiences and just understanding what high performance was all about.
Yeah. Going from not wanting to do it to, representative.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I know. I know, I just love like, I don't know, just, when we were kids, we also had this kind of wall in our backyard, and I would just spend all day just throwing tennis balls at it. I love, like, just hand-eye coordination, like, quick reactions, and that just transferred really well to netball.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
that's awesome. So talk to me about, obviously you worked in the corporate world before what you do now, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into that as well.
mm,
But talk to me about the corporate world. What were what's your reflections from the corporate world? What do you think corporate does well and
yeah,
what corporate doesn't do well?
that's a really good question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. What corporate does really well, I think, is a really great training ground. I think school sets you up well for corporate world in terms of playing within boundaries, being conformist, which actually is attractive to a lot of people. And thank goodness, because we need people that are in these corporations that get to build these things and these companies that we end up using as services and for products. Um, so for me, it was a great training ground. I learnt a lot about, the importance of systems and policy, working with teams, leading, budgets, all that sort of stuff that I don't really love so much nowadays. But when I was 25 working for Accenture and I had that quarter life crisis, the reason I had that crisis was because that consulting company and like many great organizations, they hire really great talent. So I was working with amazing people who I absolutely loved and cherished and learnt from. But then there's so many process engineered in that kind of engineers your talent and creativity out of the process. And so anytime I'd go in there, I was just trying to work within the confines of the policy and the framework. And I felt really stifled in that. And that's when I had that leap out to Wicked Campers, which was a complete 180 in terms of so I discovered what happens when you have no policy, no process, no systems, and you're really leaning on people's goodwill and their discretionary effort and their intrinsic drive, which then can also lead to burnout. So both when you compare the extremes, as a solopreneur, I try to play, I guess, in the middle of that. I need just enough systems and policy and support, but I also why I love running my own business is because of the creative freedom that I have and the decisions I get to make, and I choose what risk I'm willing to tolerate.
Yeah. And was there a moment that corporate to running your own business kind of was born?
That's a really good question. I think it was actually born back in 2009 when I was working for Wicked Campers because my boss is just an entrepreneur, and so he would hand me all these books by Jim Rohn, books by Brian Tracy, and he got me thinking like an entrepreneur back then, and a colleague there handed me The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. So my first journey into entrepreneurial sort of side hustle life was I wrote a netball coaching manual. It's called Up and In, and it's just like a shooting guide, and I sold it online just as a PDF in 2009. And I remember the first day I woke up and there's an email and I got paid like $20 overnight from this, and I was like, "Wow, if you can make 20 bucks, like what else is possible?" So I think it always had that. But then, when I was living in Broome in Western Australia, which is where like I so through my job at Wicked Campus, I met my husband and relocated over there. I got really caught up in the community and my local job there working for the WA government that I forgot about the entrepreneurial stuff. And it was only when I got back into corporate life, that I wanted to make that shift. And I think I'd always wanted to own my own business and do what I did internally, externally. And at that point in life for the mining company, I was hosting workshops around the world, which is again another great advantage of corporate. It gives you that exposure. I mean, incredible. And actually, the podcast, my first podcast, First Time Facilitator, was born when I was working internally because I ran a workshop in Canada, my first ever one. I was jet lagged. I had no idea what I was doing. I think it was at a town called Fort McMurray. I was the only female in that room, and there were like 30 male mining supervisors. And I thought it was going well up until one point in the first day when one of the participants like just refused to participate in an activity. And I went to the next person and he's like, "I'm not doing it either." Oh, and so I had to pause there, kind of, and I brought it back on track, but I got back to Australia and I was like, what do you do when that happens? Like, what do you do if that happens again? Like, and no one teaches you that. So that's why I started the podcast. Just started bringing out facilitator friends, and just scratching my own itch because no podcast out there existed like that. And that's actually how I unintentionally built my audience, built my personal brand within the business, got a ton more opportunities, and that was like the launch pad for the business.
Yeah, perfect. So tell me, what are the secrets if for someone, a workshop facilitator or someone standing up and they just lose the crowd, uh, how do you get it back?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many different approaches, and there's preventative, of course, which are probably way better than having to pull something in the moment, which is what I had to do. But luckily, I mean, that in that situation, that morning, I'd framed the experience. Expectation setting is number one, and we had really done some work on the corporate values. We'd like brought them to life, um, and so I actually went back to one of those corporate values and was like, and talked about learning what it's like when you're trying to learn, but things are uncomfortable and you're out of your comfort zone. So I had these frameworks that I could lean upon, thank goodness. For something like where you're just like, okay, this has happened, I haven't prepared for it. I think calling a break is actually a good idea. A lot of the time as well, if you think it's you, like you think you're the problem, but often when you have a conversation, I mean, this guy, I did have a chat to him and he had a lot of stuff going on outside of work. And we do forget that we think we're hosting this environment, we're in 100% in control of everything that happens. That was my approach. It was like, I'm in control of this. I make it or break it. What I've realized over the years is actually becoming more of a lazy facilitator and recognizing that it's a partnership with the people
Mhm.
in your group. It's a 50-50. Um, and so I guess lowering my expectations of what I could actually deliver and not putting so much pressure on myself. And as a result, that's more freeing, you're more relaxed and in flow with that. So, but I guess, since then, what's been interesting is I haven't had, and touch wood, haven't had anything to that extent. And maybe if I have, I've just felt more capable of of going there or, pausing the program and not having to just follow this pre-made agenda.
Yeah, you've just jinxed it now, you know that, Leanne.
I know. I know. What workshop have I got next? I'm gonna have to
The universe always, it's like when you wake up and you go, "It's gonna be a good day," and then
yeah, I feel invincible. Like even this morning, I've had these. I did a podcast episode. I called it not bureaucracy, bureau crazy. Just change the C for a Z. I woke up this morning. My aura ring is like you're at 98% readiness, like out of 100. So I'm feeling amazing. And then the day, like, had to deal with the transport department again, and just recognize all these other things I need to do. And so I got back home and like, right, reset the day. So
no, that's awesome. So talk to me about the transition from corporate to, your own business.
mm.
Now, I've got a lot of friends, that are in that consultancy workshop, stepping out into their own business. It's hard as you start working with organizations because there's opportunities obviously to pull you back into corporate, right? You've always got people wanting to pull you back into corporate. How did you resist that?
How did I resist that? I guess I, um, well, that's a very interesting question. So it was actually a good idea for me to have as a fallback. So the reason I left my business was because left the company was like, look, I won't be unemployable within 12 months. So if I do get called back, I don't see that I don't think that's failure, to be honest. I think it's just an evolution of where you're going. And so if that's you, you've been called back, there's a reason for it, like good on you. And life is a journey. For me, I think it's because I just kept consistently building up different clients, different opportunities, pivoting outside of even where I was at. One of the I mean, this is in the first sort of 9 months of leaving. My favorite author flew me to Paris, and we ran workshops for Chanel together. So, you have an experience like that, and the year after COVID hit, and I didn't go back into an organization, but I was subcontracting and doing a lot of work in a mine up north. But you do things to respond to the market and things like that as well. But never at any time was there did I have this inkling that things weren't going to go okay. And I think I'm okay with risk tolerance. Now, saying that, I think it's very different. I have a husband who works and loves working, loves getting a paycheck. So there's always, for me, the risk, and just to be honest, is it's not as risky as someone who doesn't have that as a fallback. They've really got to be looking ahead, making sure they're generating that income and everything else. And during COVID, my business actually improved because I pivoted my content to a lot around how do you engage people virtually. And instead of
Mm.
working with corporations in 2020, I started selling more to B2C. So helping fellow facilitators run engaging workshops. So I've always had kind of diversified my offerings. And that I think has been that's supported my ability just to kind of stand alone and keep going.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's kind of a bit of the, like, burn the boats, right?
Yeah, I love that. You know, I know I love bold leadership and statements like that I am here for.
Yep.
No
Yep.
vanilla and feel like we need to improve profit by 5%. That doesn't drive me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And, I think you're a big believer in, within organizations, it's really about if you want to improve the bottom line, if you want to improve your profit, you have to work with your people and help your
Yeah.
people grow.
I mean, that's all organizations are. It's just people working together. I mean, that's really it. And a lot of the focus goes on other things and strategy and everything else. And strategy is important and having a vision of where you want to go because that does help mobilize your people. But it's the people that are delivering on that are executing on whatever plan that is. And I find this interesting. I'm curious to hear what you think about this, but I've seen stats this year that Gallup have shared around in the US, and I'm sure this is replicated in Australia as well. Like engagement is at an all-time low. Engagement is an all-time
Mm.
low, yet the amount of content and information and sessions and development that's being run around leadership is at an all-time high. Like, can you look at the amount of information we have, yet I'm just curious, are you noticing the same thing? Like, and plus, like, the mental health, like, the overlay of that, it's all contributing to this.
I think there's actually a lot now. Like, I
Yeah.
think a lot of organizations are like, oh, we've got to do mental health stuff. We've got to do this kind of training. We've got to run our events. And I think there's actually a lot now. And I think some of the feedback that I've had from chatting to some of my friends that are in organizations, they're like, how do we do all this? Like
No.
they're trying to provide too much. So I think sometimes it's almost getting back to basics a little bit,
Mm.
but also making sure that you're getting the key components of what they need. And obviously, a good friend of yours and mine is Stephen Demedio. And I know hey, Steve, because he'll listen to this one, I'm sure.
You will.
But, in the chat I had with him on the podcast as well, we were talking about, organizations, you know, getting into kind of, and they talk about this on a travel perspective, him and Mark, but really about don't think you know what your team needs.
Mm.
Like actually, what do they actually need and not what you need, right? What you think they need, because a lot of the time organizations say, okay, they need more sales training and they need more leadership training and they need all these things. And it's like, no, actually, what do they need? Like, and having the kind of courage to stand up in front of a group and kind of going, you'll see there's a blank page here. What do you want to talk about? What are the burning issues right now that we can help you go from A to B to C to D to E?
Love that. Yeah. And my biggest mistake as a leader was not doing that. When I was young in WA and running a marketing department, every Monday morning is like pre-filled agenda. This is what we're talking about. These are the talking points. And then the last 5 minutes, any questions? But I mean, you learn sort of going through that, but it was, I thought I'm a friendly person but doing that just did not inspire loyalty or discretionary effort. And yeah, I learned a lot from that experience. I think what you're talking about, absolutely true. I mean, this goes for leadership, but also goes for marketing as well. Is like just listening to people. It's such an underrated skill, isn't it? We look at expertise, it's all about being the person that's speaking, but a lot of it is listening and just understanding what the patterns are and being responsive to what that is, but also then deciding, is this what we're after? And if it's not, how do I, if we're going this way and I want to influence behavior, how do I work with my people? How do I just truly listening to them? There's a great line, Pat Flynn talks about it. It's called learning the lyrics. Actually just using the language that you're hearing to help then shape an idea too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the key things, I know Gary Vee says, I know a lot of the influencers out there talk about it, some of those business leaders, but around about, if you kind of want to make money, if you want to make impact, if you want to grow your business, find, what's the problem that your clients or your customers are having and work out a solution.
Yeah. That's all business is. It's solving problems, and that's, I think, my even my podcast, why it did so well. It was made for N equals 1. It was made for me. My problem was I need help in running these workshops, and then what you realize is that other people around the world resonate with that problem and want a solution as well. And I think we often, you're right, sometimes when things don't work, and even when I've run things that haven't worked, it's because it's been a push from me as opposed to a pull from my group. My book, The
Well,
2-Hour Workshop Blueprint, the reason I wrote that title was because I went into my own Facebook group. I've got about 2,800 facilitators in there. I was just seeing what questions are they asking, and I literally got a Google sheet out. And all these questions are around, how do I run a 2-hour workshop on X, on Y, on Z? And I'm like, the pattern here is 2-hour workshops. Can I solve for that? And the reason it's sold well and continues to sell and get feedback is because it's a prescription for that problem.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. And I think one of the things you touch on there is the word collaboration, right? I think in facilitation, in organizations, in leadership, in workshops, I think these days the collaboration between great minds is a great way to not just leverage each other's kind of profile and I suppose expertise, but really just spread the impact of what each of you are bringing to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of phrases for this. Like, one is, like, I call it thought breeding. So rather than being a thought leader who just stands on their own and shares their thoughts, I think thought breeding is more fun because exactly what you've said. And then the other phrase I like is a phrase my friend Jenny Blake, she's that author I mentioned before. She talks about friend touring. So rather than
Yep.
seeing mentors as like I'm going to look up, it's like we've got each other, and often that's
Yep.
really way more valuable. And I've even discovered in my like facilitation and consulting roles, a lot of it now is rather than like leading, there's no real content. It's more about, hey, here's a process or here's a story. How is this applicable? Like, how could you use this in your setting? And again, more lazier facilitation, but way more valuable for the group.
Yeah. And it really is like I've spoken in the last couple of years, spoken to people that are speakers, people that workshop facilitators. It's interesting. I've, kind of caught up with some of them and I've said, oh, what about this or what about that? And it's so funny. So many of them are still in that scarcity mindset rather than the abundance mindset. Like
Mhm.
oh, but if I share a little bit of that, then I'll lose this. And it's kind of like,
No,
no,
you
you'll
don't.
actually, your business will grow more.
1,000,000%. I can I share a lot of ideas openly, and the reason I have my daily podcast is I'm sick of putting my ideas in my iPhone notes and they're gone. And like, if someone takes an idea and runs with it, like, well done, because I don't have I don't have the time or or like to execute on every single idea that I have.
Yep.
And I think I mean, what is it, the saying, "A rising tide lifts all boats."
Yep.
My mentor, Alan Weiss, he is a mentor, he's not my friend, or even though I would say we're friends now, but he's definitely he's a rock star of consulting, written 60 books on the topic. He said, "Do you ever notice the people with the weakest brands never share their ideas?" Oh,
Mhm.
it's so true. It's 'cause it's that scarcity mindset. I think the more that you give, the more that you get, and it's not even about getting back, it's just about being generous and helping to just lift lift the frequency of the world a bit.
Yeah. And I think if you're true, authentic, and you connect with your, audience, at the end of the day, people can take your ideas, but the one thing they can't replicate is you.
Ah, exactly, particularly in the AI world, and this is why, I love just having great chats like this with just normal people because, like, not normal people, but, like,
Are you
um,
calling me normal?
I
Thanks, Leanne.
well, not normal. Normal's probably not the no,
I'm
just
not normal.
genuine Aussies, genuine Aussies, real talk is probably what I
Real talk.
mean. It's probably and, like, even with my daily podcast, because I was like, "Well, I wanna do a podcast, but what's the topic?" And it's like, I think AI can do any topic in the world better than I could do a topic, to be honest. But what AI cannot replicate is my stupid jokes, sharing what I love, my walks out on the beach, and just riffing on myself. And so that, I think, is the unlock. When we're in this technology age where it's all about, like, brilliant content and polish, it's actually the advantage is being unpolished. And, like, even that us just laughing about that stupid gag about being normal, people connect with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's gonna be on, Leanne on demand now.
Yes, I would love to play a snippet of this on the show.
That'd be awesome. So talk to me about the podcast. Obviously late last year, you're kind of like, I'm going to launch this podcast. It's going to be a daily.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how it's going.
Yeah, I felt when I had that idea, I was, like, really scared by it. And I actually did a podcast recording about how I felt even just announcing it, because then once you announce it to the world, then that's how I operate. Like, I have a big goal. I wanna share it with people because I don't like letting other people down, but I can quietly let myself down. So, the first thing I had to do was the second I decided, I was like, "Commit, share it to my, like, 200 people on Instagram," but that's still a commitment. I was really worried about, like, what's the format here? I think the biggest hurdle for me was, what is a podcast? And, like, my show was, like, weekly. It was, like, like yours, like, 1-hour interviews, really great show notes. I'd promote the guests thoroughly, do all this work post-production. And I thought daily, I just can't do that. So it was really a kind of radically rethinking and challenging every assumption I had about podcasting, because I had to make it a daily show. I think the best thing about it, what's been really cathartic, is what I shared before, is that last year I'd have these ideas and I'd get really frustrated with myself because I'm like, "That's a good idea," but it just wouldn't go anywhere, and then I'd forget about it. But now at least I have a forum where if I just have an idea, like, and usually it comes to me like a couple of words or a cool phrase. Now I just grab up my phone, I talk about it for 5 minutes, and that's an episode. And for me, it's not even about, I don't really mind. I'm not It's not driven by building an audience. Like, there's no external, measure of success for it. The measure of success for it is just me committing to something, having a bit of discipline around something, 'cause usually I'm pretty, like, organic and love going with the flow, so that's nice. And the other thing is, like, I have an outlet. It's a creative expression. And now that I'm doing it, actually, I'm noticing more in the world, and
Yep.
these stories that I would forget are actually becoming part of the show and becoming something that's quite memorable that I can use, like, in speeches and workshops after that. Because
Yeah.
often, I don't know if you find this when you're running a workshop, you're like, "Oh, I want to explain this point. I need a story for it." And it's hard to find a story in the moment, but if you start collecting stories every day, you've got a bank that you can use.
Yeah. I've just started the process of writing a book, and it's
Oh,
interesting
wow.
as I've started to kind of put my thoughts down and, start the words after words after words. It was funny, like day one was like, oh, I hit 1,000 words. Cool. And then I just keep going on. But it's interesting because as you start writing, and it's probably the power of journaling a little bit as well, and it's something that I really love, is that once you start writing on something, you go, oh yeah, and all these stories and all these moments and experiences from the past come back and you go, yeah, wow. Actually, how would I have thought about that differently? What would I have done differently back in that? And it's great then, kind of absorbing that into the topic that I'm writing about. So
Oh, are you able to share what you're writing about, or is it too early?
it's really about, for me, it's really about the noise of life. So
Mm,
going through my life, going through mental health, going through childhood, and really how we kind of get stuck in our heads a little bit. Um,
amazing.
but but we get stuck in the noise of everything, right? Everything is noise, and there's
Yep.
good noise, there's bad noise. There's some noise that we have to put up with, but there's
Mm.
also some noise that we shouldn't really deal with, and we should be able to kind of go, "Nah," and put that to the side.
Yeah, just, like, get those, noise cancelling headphones on.
Yeah, so it's a work in progress, but
I love it. I love it.
that'll come to a little bit more of fruition as the year goes on.
I think you've landed a really interesting topic there, because a lot of the time I'm hearing from people, there's just so much content, there's so much coming in. And I think, sorry, I know you asked the question around my podcast. I'm finding I'm rather than consuming more, I'm having to create more, which is more
Mm.
nourishing, like what you were talking about in terms of writing, because then you get to reflect, you get to do all these sort of cool things that are actually more valuable for you, as opposed to just inputting more content. Um, yeah.
Because there's so much content out there, right? Like you can doom scroll and scroll through Instagram, LinkedIn, all these places.
Mhm.
You can't actually consume that much information. And I go through stages, and I don't know if you're the same, but I'll go through stages where I will listen to a few podcasts, and then I'll go, actually, audiobooks. But there's also times where I just sit there and I go, I can't listen to anything. My brain
Same.
is fried.
Ah, I go through that all the time. Yes. And then it's just like, just throw on some Spotify or just nothing. And sometimes, like, I'll even just go for a walk. and my AirPods are in, but I'm not listening to anything. I just want to that way because I just want to like just be in my own head and just signal to the world. And I know that's the truth. I just have to do it sometimes for your own sanity for that exact reason. So well done you on finding that topic. That's probably the hardest thing about book writing is that decision on what your book is about. So
Yeah, so I've had for a few years, I've kind of been going, oh, I've always wanted to write a book, and I've gone through a few things, and it still may go through a couple of different changes, and as I write, and as I kind of think through it, but yeah, it's when I'm always someone that gets drawn. Like I get drawn to my guests, I get drawn to people. You meet everyone for a reason. You connect with people for a reason.
mm,
I reached out to a few of my prior guests yesterday, and I was like, you know, if there was one or two people that I should share their story, who are they? Right? Because everyone you connect with connects you to someone else. There are no accidents.
no. No. I love that approach too. This is really refreshing.
So,
And I before we go anywhere, I wanna ask you about your 'cause, like, I follow you on Instagram and you go to
yep,
this 'cause I've got a Peloton at home, so I love,
yep,
like, indoor biking, but
yep.
you go to, like, this nightclub of a studio. Have you shared that
It's
on your podcast? 'Cause it just looks unbelievable.
so Total Fusion Lions, which is part of the Total Fusion kind of gym family. It's part of the Brisbane Lions stadium, Brighton Homes Arena, out at Springfield Central. And I started as a wellness member and a gym member when it first opened about 2 and a bit years ago. And we're a founding member. And mainly for me, it was about getting into the wellness section. I didn't actually really go into the gym. The wellness section, so sauna, they have cryotherapy. They've got the cold
Wow.
plunge, the warm bath, the steam, the infrared sauna. They've got lots of different stuff. And for me, it was really about working on my, kind of recovery through mental health, and fatigue, and really kind of getting out of my head a little bit, I suppose,
Mm.
and just taking that time daily to sit and just reflect and just work on my wellness. And then over time, I kind of took the stairs upstairs, and I remember going, and I told this story recently, but I thought I'm going to I'll go and do a cycle class, right? The thing I like about cycle is I used to be a runner, but the cycle class actually is good that if you're not feeling 100%, you can you're supported and you can go at the pace that you want. But if you go in sometimes as I do and I go, I really feel like smashing myself today, I can smash myself, right? And it's hit cycle, so it's, high intensity for 30 minutes, sometimes 45, and it's just I do it 3 or 4 times a week. It's the vibe, right?
Oh,
Like it is like, um, uh, like a nightclub. And it was funny the other day, there were people on the roof of the gym doing some work, and Danielle was like, the people upstairs on the roof, the guys would be going, "What is going on at 5:45 in the morning?"
yeah, because, when you post, it looks like you're there at, like, 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, that
Yep,
kind of vibe. So,
yep,
yeah, I love that, and I'm really keen to check it out because I think
yep,
even for what you're talking about, just having that even just going there as a daily thing, just to a one-stop shop for your wellness, for your health, and everything else. And you've mentioned this a couple times already, like just getting outside. That's one of my catchphrases. Let's take this outside, and it means like yeah, literally like go outside because that is a win. And that's where a lot of my work is done is like away from the computer, but getting outside of your own head as well.
and I think the key thing is as well is that it's not just the gym, it's not just the environment, it's the instructors. The instructors are
Mm.
phenomenal, you know, phenomenal instructors, and they really give their kinda blood, sweat, and tears to the group, which is brilliant. And I think it's really ties into what you're talking about and what your passion is creating these extraordinary experiences, right?
Mm,
Like, soon we're gonna be out on the red carpet experience out in the back of Ipswich, which is gonna be brilliant.
yeah,
But I think for any organization out there, it's how can you create something that people wanna keep coming back to?
yeah. That's right, and there's a lot of there's a lot involved with it, but at the same time, there's also, like, some simple things that can be done as well, particularly in we're looking at, hybrid work, globally distributed teams. How do you build connection remotely? And sometimes, like you said, an epic couple of days offsite can just you can have lifelong friendships, lifelong experiences, jokes that sort of run that course, that maintain connection, and it's being smart around, how that is designed as well.
Yeah, and I say I say quite frequently, and I've always thought it. I've been to a lot of seminars, conferences, workshops, anything that I've ever attended. Although the content in the workshop's been fantastic, and I haven't actually been to one of your workshops, Leanne, but obviously soon. But and this is no offense to any workshop or facilitator out there or keynote speaker, but I always find that the gold is actually in the networking and the connection of the people in the room and the unpacking of the topics that were spoken about on stage or in a workshop, and then really kind of facilitating discussion around unpacking that and kind of going, what do you think works? What doesn't work? And then sometimes the ideas that come from that are even better than
Oh,
you ever thought.
1,000,000%. Yeah, I mean, like David White, who I saw on the weekend, he says that which you can plan is too small for you to live. And I just love that as a like what you talked about, it's like a million times better than what you thought. And that's why I often get FOMO when I can't make certain conferences and things like that. It's also why I get FOMO when I go to a conference or an event and a keynote speaker or a workshop facilitator is just talking at you and there's no space for that reflection. And then there's a 15-minute break and you've just started talking to someone and you have to get pulled back in. That's kind of the biggest, and I know Steve Demedio is on this wagon as well, but that's like just creating space for those organic conversations, like because what attracts you, like even to the David White experience in Byron Bay, it attracts a certain type of person. And you say, think if someone's driven and that we can be from all different. I mean, I met a lady there that worked in palliative care as a chaplain, and she uses his poetry for people at the end of their lives. Even just
Yeah,
chatting to
wow.
her beforehand was like a win without even seeing David White. Um,
Yep.
yeah, so
Yeah.
what I like about those events is, like, it's a beacon for, like, do you buy into this mission and this idea? Because then you're suddenly gonna be around like, that's the community that you wanna connect with, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And taking that time, like we're going to do in March, around just stepping out and kind of going, what are we working on? What's the future look like? And really kind of growing those ideas and actually taking feedback from others that say, well, have you thought about this or you thought about that? And, obviously I've done some men's retreats, and the power that's come from those men's retreats that have kind of propelled me to what I'm doing today has been immense.
Oh, it can completely one question can just completely reframe and transform the direction of your business and your life.
Yep.
It's not even I don't even say that as a throwaway statement, I genuinely believe in it. I mean, I've had this happen even just over today my friend Petra, Micah, and I, we did a LinkedIn takeover of each other's accounts. And early this year, we had booked in time to go do like a couple of hours of strategy. We always do it over a long lunch. And I was looking at that in my calendar and I'm like, I wanna do it, but I don't have time. I've got all this other stuff on. And of course I went because I'm a committed person. And and it was unbelievable, like, so phenomenal in terms of what we spoke about, what we shared, just even in that small period of time. And often I think that's the challenge, like, and I'm a big proponent of this idea, and I still find it challenging to commit to it and put that time aside because of, again, like you said, all that noise that is hitting us, things that we think are important, that are urgent, we get them confused.
Before we get back into the episode, from time to time you might have a burning question, a guest recommendation, a comment, or some feedback, which I always appreciate. If so, I'd love to continue the conversation after this episode, so let's connect. I'm easy to find, but the best place to engage and connect is on Instagram, @TheSteveHodgson. But that's enough from me. Let's get back into the episode.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly
Mm.
right. So, Leanne, I'd kind of mentioned early on in the episode that, you come across as a very energetic, strong, just like busy, 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 like really positive, really optimistic. But take me behind the scenes. Obviously, there's a lot of energy that you put out.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the moments of self-doubt and does the imposter syndrome come
Oh,
in for you?
yeah. Absolutely, 1,000,000%. Like, you don't wanna be hanging out with me after a workshop, and often, like, clients say, "Hey, if it's a 2-day event, like, come out for us day 1, like, we'll go out for dinner," and I'm like, "No," because I've left it all on the table. And I mean, the best person to ask about who I am behind the scenes is my husband because he sees it, and my dogs. But like I said, I was shy as a kid. I do love being in front of groups, but I absolutely need that time to recharge, to think, to reflect, to write, just to chill out. I mean, I love, like I said, I played netball as a team sport, but I love running just because it's an individual sport. I'm out on my own. I get time to process those ideas. In terms of self-doubt, there is and it always shifts. There's always nervousness because, as you build your brand, you get different opportunities, you get exposed to different audiences, and so it's a good thing. Like, it's a great thing that I have self-doubt. And you have different coping strategies. So my strategy is always, I guess, preparation, but also a reminder just to be present and to be open in terms of what happens. And also, I guess, that reframe of, sure, I'm bringing, I'm in charge of this group, but they're also adults in charge of their own energy as well. I think self-worth is a huge thing. And eh, self-talk and what you actually like, pulling up your own thoughts. So I keep talking about Alan Weiss, but he was the biggest influence in my career, and we just met through the podcast, actually. I interviewed him back in an episode in 2020, and it was like he was coaching me. He disrupted my ideas around what a consulting business is all about. And he just spoke about how self-worth impacts, your value, what you charge, and just, I guess, as a solopreneur, your relationship with rejection. And it's something that I've had to, like, it's easy for me to just say, "Oh, yeah, I've had to fall in love with it." I still don't. Like, the other day, I think in one day, so everyone got back from leave in about February, and I think it was one Monday or Tuesday, I get 3 emails. 2 are rejections from a proposal, and one is they accepted the proposal. But I only focus on the rejections. And I messaged my friend Andy Storch in Barcelona, and I'm like, "It's International Rejection Day." And, that's it. Like, whereas when I was working in a corporation, I'd kind of look at a friend and you're representing a business. So it's a bit different when you get rejected that way. But when you're a personal brand, you can't let it get to you. And so, yeah, my
Yep.
coping strategies are, um, go for a run, talk it out, have friend tools all around the world that are in similar situations, learn from the experience, and kind of pull your head up and go, like, evaluate it from then once the emotion has passed from a logical level, really, what would I have done differently? A lot of times, sometimes it isn't anything I could have controlled myself. So that's life. And rejection, it's so close to, like, uh, everything that good is on the other side of rejection. And I'm sure that's a cliche that's been passed along, but yeah.
I think it's a test for us. It's interesting
Ah,
this
I love
week.
that.
This week I had a lady reach out to me and she says, "Look, I've got a client. This is the client. They'd love to, we've looked into your podcast, would love to look at, kind of her being a guest on your podcast." And I said, "Oh, great. Yeah, cool." She's like, "I just want, how many listeners do you get and how
Mhm.
many this and how many that, right?" So I responded and said, "Look, these are the listeners. This is what is." And she came back to me and she said, "Oh, look, I wish you all the best with your show, but my client's looking for a show that's got more listeners." Right. And I was like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, no, all good." Right. And I was like optimistic about it. But
Yeah.
it hurts, right?
Yeah.
Because you sit there and you go, "Oh, I'm putting all this, this effort into it." But for me, I do this because I love it.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned it a couple of times recently on episodes, but Stephen Bartlett posted on LinkedIn. I don't know if you follow Stephen Bartlett
I
from A
love
Diary of a CEO,
Yeah, I do.
and he posted last year, celebrating 7 years of the podcast. And he was like, for the first 3 years, hardly anyone listened, and if you're going to do something, it's kind of, you got to do it that you're not going to get paid, because I definitely don't get paid to do this podcast.
Yeah.
But I know that the connections and the collaborations and also the stories I'm sharing, the knowledge that I'm actually also gathering from those connections and from those stories as well, are worth far more than any kind of monetary value that could be paid to me. I know that.
Yeah, so 2 things, I guess. One is, that's such an interesting thing because it's not like you reached out to the guest and you were rejected. They reached out to you and then they rejected you. I just find that kind of comical. Like, so I feel for you. I know what you mean. Like, intellectually, it's like it doesn't really make sense to be emotional about it, but emotionally, I would have felt the same, even though they it's such a weird that's a really strange dynamic. So let's just call that one out as a, "Hey, you
Yeah.
approached me." So anyway, that's good. What does Mel Robbins say? "Let them." I love that.
Let them. Yeah, I'm actually listening to that book at the moment. I
Oh,
know, obviously, I've been on a couple of men's retreats with Mel's husband, Chris, Soul Degree
oh,
over in America.
wow.
And that was been phenomenal. So Chris and I'm part of his huddle. I have been part of every huddle that he's had in the last few years. So
Amazing.
it's been awesome, an awesome journey. And him and Mel are complete opposites, right? Like, Mel is out there, but Chris is like, "Oh, I'll just do 2 retreats a year or 3 retreats a year," whereas, if it was Mel would probably be like, "I'm gonna do a retreat every month and we're gonna," those kind of things. So they're 2 different people, but obviously I think, from knowing them both, They just balance each other out.
Mm. Oh, well, that's I didn't
So,
know that. That's so cool, and I'd love for, at our camp, I'd love you to maybe share a couple of things that you've sort of picked up from that time. Um,
yeah.
the second thing I was talking, do you know Cherie Canning from Flight
I
Centre
sure
as
do.
well?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I was
Yep.
talking to her, last week, and we were talking about, like, the podcasts and, like, the uplift it is, and then, like, balancing these 2 things, return on investment versus return on luck, and where I see podcasting is the ROL, like, it's ROL, and even with my show, like, there's some indirect lines to revenue, but it wasn't about that. It was about the fact that I could write a book in 52 days was because I'd interviewed 200 experts on the topic. Like, and you don't really, it's kind of, you can link it going back, but never, a podcast is not an investment decision in terms of I'm going to make X. It's what you talked about, like the exponential ideas that you have, the connections. Uh, Also, your ability as a communicator, I think, is probably the number one thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. And I think Cherie and I actually had a conversation very early on. Um, they started their podcast, I started mine. And it was interesting because after a few months, we were catching up and she said to me, oh, she said, oh, my marketing team's asking you, how do you, kind of, you've got to produce revenue from this podcast, right? And it's like,
Mm.
well, it's hard because if you start charging or you start kind of selling too much on a podcast, you kind of lose that authenticity a little bit. And it's about having that balance. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the key things. I don't think a podcast is to share your thoughts, share stories, share your guests, have those conversations. But for me, I just don't think it's a place to get that ROI from a
Yeah.
monetary perspective. I think it's a tool to then allow you to lean into other areas. And it also allows you to go, oh, I'm a podcast host, right?
Yeah, I really love that. It is a tool to lean into other, it's like part of a broader ecosystem. It's not the thing. It's not a service. It's not like you sell it. You're right. And I think if you have that sort of, mindset, you'll be successful. But it is maybe defining what, like, rather than the external, like I said, talked about external measures of success, what actually would it mean to, and like I said, as a podcast host, it gives you permission really to reach out to anyone and maybe get more of a chance of them saying yes than, 'cause I find that, as I was going back to that conversation around audience numbers, I've never had that.
Yep.
Yeah, especially for someone reaching out to me. So I
For me, I always find if they're asking about that, I'm never drawn to that person because
no,
I think they're
no.
just chasing the quick road to success.
Yes.
And just because audience numbers doesn't mean you're going to get that quick road to success either. And one of the things is
No.
and my marketing team that helped me on the podcast and do the reels, they're always pushing me to say, oh, you need bigger guests with bigger reaches. And I'm like, no, I said everyone's got a story and I'm unlocking stories. And we talk about, like if I had Matthew McConaughey on the podcast, right? Yeah, he's got a great following, right? But he is doing podcasts left, right, and center. He's on a lot of podcasts, right? So where's the rarity in that? I want to unlock
Yeah.
like the stories of people that maybe the stories haven't even been shared yet.
Yeah, well, actually, I love that your interview with Peter Brewer. I was like, "Who is this guy?" He sounds like the male version of me, so I've connected with
Yeah.
him on LinkedIn. Like, and so if it took you though to spot someone like him, and I even think, like, let's just say you've got 50 downloads. Imagine being in front of a room of 50 people that are listening to you for over an hour, and just see, and the relationships your listeners have with you is unmatched. Like even through my facilitation podcast, like people reach out to me as if they're my best friends already, and I
Yep.
ended up co-facilitating with a guy that I met. He was listening to the podcast. He's a CEO for a company in Switzerland. We ran a workshop together in Melbourne the other week, and he only realized, like, this is maybe the third time we've met. He only realized as we're talking about it, he's like, "Oh, wow, this is weird." I was like, "We have a weird relationship because I know everything about you, and you don't know that much about me." Yeah, it really, I mean, I think we live in the best time. Like, the fact that we
Yep.
can produce these media platforms and have them scale globally and connect with people is absolutely incredible. We're so lucky.
Yeah. And the legacy that these conversations leave, right? Because the
Yeah.
people, our kids, grandkids, great grandkids, our families, right, for generations will be able to click back. I don't know what it'll be then, if it just clicks into sunglasses, or whether they just, kind of click on it in their head, and it plays. But they're going to be able to see this, So
Yeah.
the stories that I share, and sometimes I get a lot of my guests that say, I've never been asked that question, right, on the podcast that I've been on. And I love that, because that's an answer that they've never given.
Yeah, you're doing it yeah, you think about, like, was it posterity? It's
Mm.
really quite powerful, and I ran a Sally Prosser and I run a workshop called Get to the Point, and someone in that group was talking about, like, one of their biggest regrets in life was not recording their mother's voice. Like, they had lots of photos of her, but never her voice, like, saying, "Hello, good morning," and they said, "Make sure you just start capturing that," and I think, well, there's no excuse now with all the tools we have available, but right, and I think even in this podcast, you've asked me stuff that I've never ever shared publicly, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a gift that you're doing that too, to be honest. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And in Peter Brewer's episode, he talks about how he got to interview his mum, but he
Yeah.
never got to interview his dad, right? So, that was a hard part. But, obviously his mum was his kind of greatest teacher, right? And greatest influence. So, it
Mm.
was nice to hear that. But I think, anyone listening now, everyone's got a digital device that they can record, right? Just start recording people in your life before their stories are lost.
Mm. They do say, and not to bring this, but, like, 9/11, the voicemail messages, like, just the amount, like, the power of those and just listening to those, and I've interviewed my dad on my podcast, but not my mum, and so I should definitely do that, or just, and even my father-in-law, he just tells these great stories about, the war in Vietnam and mateship, all that stuff that is, even from a historical perspective, is actually quite fascinating, but when you've heard it 3 times, you're like, "Okay. All right, we've heard that one. Let's move on."
It sounds like my dad's jokes. When you've heard them the third time, 30th time, or 300th time, yeah, they lose a bit of impact.
That's right.
Leanne, I wanted to ask you, is there a belief or habit that you had early on in your career that you've changed?
Yeah, I think, there's probably many. I think probably is separating a couple of equations I had in my head. So I thought, like, yeah, as in, so from a workshop perspective, more content equals more value. Going back to what we spoke about before, it's actually more about the connection points and giving people less, and maybe giving them a clear path versus giving them everything. I think that association of more time equals more value is also one I've had to, um that's a corporate thing, and it's been bred into me, and so when I left my job, the first thing I wanted to do was, like, fill up my 40 hours of the week with stuff, and it took me a while just to kind of get out of that mindset, and even working with clients, it's not the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears that I put into a job. They don't care about that, they care about the result, and it's actually more valuable if I can get them the result quicker than become, like, this codependent person that coaches someone for years. Like, if I can give them a result within a week versus, so I'm always asking this question now of, like, how can I do this faster in the best interests of them and create more value for them as fast as I can? And, yeah, so just holding those, I guess those were the 2 of the assumptions I had to break: more content and more time equals more value, because it doesn't. And then when you have that as your idea and a business model and the way that you lead things, it's quite refreshing, but you also have to question conventional ways of doing things, because convention kind of can lead you the other way. More work, more
Yeah.
process is more value. Yeah.
Yeah. Great answer. And what role has failure played in your success?
I've got a weird, I don't think I still don't think I am that comfortable with failure. Like, and I think this is a reason why I'm just on the hesitation station around my second book, because the first one I think has been pretty successful. And then now it's like when a band releases a second album, it's like there's expectation now on that. And so, while I love to say flippantly, "Oh, I love failure," like, honestly, it is impacting my ability to make decisions. Sometimes, when I know that's happening, one thing I just do is, like, just, yeah, get off that hesitation station and just take action, like share something publicly, because then I'm on notice. But that hasn't happened for this. Like, I've created a blog about my next book. I've been talking about it, and just nothing's been sort of
Mhm.
set into gear. I think there's something around kind of like divine timing as well. Sometimes
Mm.
you gotta wait for an idea to hit you that lands, and it's the right one, and I'm waiting for that. Um Failure, I think through sport, I've learnt about, I was trying out for various teams. One of my biggest, I guess, failures was when I thought I was gonna make the state team when I was 17. I didn't make the team. I was gutted about that for weeks. Like, I couldn't shake that just the expectation and then the loss of that. It was a kind of nice ending because the week before nationals, unfortunately, someone in the team got injured. They pulled me in, and I ended up being starting 7, and so it's like, what I guess was like, take that opportunity every time. And so, you spoke a bit before about self-doubt. Anytime that an opportunity arrives and I'm like, "I'm not sure, I might fail, this might not work," I know it's the time I have to say yes to it. So I kind of reframe it now as like, "You don't wanna do this? That's exactly why you have to do it."
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's how I see it.
Yep.
What about you, though? Sorry to
In regards to,
failure, like, what's your relationship with it? That's a good question.
I I don't think there is failure. I think there's learning.
Yeah.
Like for me, probably failure was there, but through my journey, I kind of now it's around about what have I learned from that? And I
Yeah,
find
nice.
there's nothing, everything happens for a reason, right? Um, so if something doesn't work out or something doesn't go right, what have I learned from that? Because next time you're actually you're better placed to actually deal with that.
Love that.
And sometimes, like it's interesting, being in the real estate industry for so many years. When I was in real estate, it was interesting, sometimes I'd lose a listing that I really fought hard to get. Like I
Mm.
fought hard. I did everything. I did the calls, I dropped off gifts, I did everything to try and kind of win this listing. And I wouldn't get it. But, it was interesting because, maybe 6 weeks down the track, I'm at an open home and I talked to a buyer and they said, "Yeah, we had a contract on this property." And I went, "Oh, yeah, okay. Which property was that?" They tell me, "Yeah, yeah, it was riddled with termites," or whatever it is. So sometimes there's a reason you don't get something, right?
Yeah,
Like it wasn't meant to be. Sometimes you kind of dodge a bullet, I suppose, in some cases. So
very
I
true.
think it's about being drawn to things, but it's also about feeling when things aren't kind of the right alignment for you as well. And that's what I really focus on sometimes as well. Like sometimes, and I say to people, I've got a couple of PR agencies that reach out to me and kind of say, "Here's some recommended guests." And I don't take all the guests, and I don't say that I'm going to take all the guests because I'll be if they align to where I'm at and how I'm feeling and my gut feel right now is I'll interview them. But it could be 3 months down the track that I'll actually say, "Yeah, okay, that's the story I want to tell now." Or, I've kind of watched them on social media a little bit more and I kind of get more of a feel for the story that is beneath the story that they
Mm.
were going to want to tell. So it's just about being drawn to things, I think.
I love that, yeah, and I mean, I'm sure the people that you work with as well, like, a lot of the time when when people reach out to me or they wanna get coached is because they wanna do something, but they have a fear that, there's some type of fear that of a failure that's in the way, and a lot of the time it's just validating that, but you won't get anywhere in life if you don't have, I guess, if you don't run to like, anytime you do something, there's an inherent risk it's not going to work, and it's okay. I think
Yeah.
your way of saying you can learn from it, and the only way of testing ideas out is by putting them out there to the world and to the
Yeah.
market, which is a reality, which is what Jim Rohn always talks about.
Well, and if you think about some of the biggest people, biggest influencers out there, the people that are really quite successful, or we deem them as successful
Mm,
in society, some of them, some of the books that have been bestsellers were like ones that they didn't actually even want to publish.
yeah, I love those stories. I love those stories. So reassuring.
Like Mel Robbins, she wrote the Let Them theory because she, had this experience, did a video, posted a video on the Let Them, and it blew up. And she was like, I've got to write a book on this, and that's kind of how she tells it, how it happened, which is crazy, right? Because
So
it's,
good.
but the amount of content that she shares, and I just saw yesterday, which is awesome, that I think she's taken the top spot off Joe Rogan for the fourth time now.
No
Um,
way, in Spotify for podcasting.
yep,
That is incredible.
yep,
That
and
is
I think
huge, yeah.
the Let Them theory has really kind of
Yeah.
driven that
Everyone's saying
because
it right now.
it's relatable. Like everyone's let them. Like I was talking to two friends last week, and they're like, "Just let them." So
It's very cathartic.
yeah,
It's,
yeah, it is.
and it's like, you don't really need to read the book to get the message, right? And I like books that are like that. I spotted, Wayne Dyer's book on the back there. I've got one of his books that I've never read. I don't need to read it. It's Never Crowded Along the Extra Mile. It's like, I
Yeah.
get it. I don't need to read the book. Some like, there's
Yeah,
titles like that, you're like, the magic is the title.
it is, it
Yeah.
is. And there's so much content now on YouTube that you can jump on and watch of people,
Mm.
unfortunately, I didn't get to meet Wayne in person before he passed, but I feel like I have met him, because of the videos, the stuff that he did with Louise Hay.
Mm.
He did stuff with Esther Hicks. So I feel like, that's a legacy that everyone's going to be able to listen to, which is fantastic.
Yeah. And that's the beauty now is that, we talked about mentors and learning from each other. The fact that our mentors can be the Steve Bartletts and the Mel Robbins of the world. And we don't need
Yeah.
to personally know them, but we can just gain so much from, and then back to your thing about noise, that's being selective around, okay, given my life and what I want, what do what's the 5% of this that I take into my own world?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask, obviously we're always, growing, we're always learning. What's one thing that you fully haven't understood about yourself yet?
Oh, what's one thing I haven't fully that's a brilliant question. Ah, it's one thing I haven't fully
I love
understood myself.
stumping guests.
Yeah, I haven't thought about this. Um, oh, you really have stumped me there, but I wanna come back to you with an answer, so
Yeah. What's something you've been working on? What's something that you want to improve? Something that you just haven't unlocked yet?
I don't think I've unlocked, um, the I don't think I've unlocked maybe from a marketing perspective, and I think this is a common thing with consultants, maybe not, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we all think we're the best kept secret, all of us, and so and maybe that's just an arrogance or something, but it's like, I don't think I've unlocked the ability to take, I guess, my ideas and really, like, what Mel Robbins has done with Let Them, like, really get something and go hard with it. Back to what I said before around I kind of flitter my ideas away and there's no real focus point for them. So maybe the thing I haven't figured out is, what is holding me back from making a decision on just really driving one thing through? Is it the
Yep.
fear of failure? Is it FOMO? Like, what is going on there? Because often that is the unlock. And I've often resisted like niching and all that sort of thing. But at the same time, we live in a world that uh, people need to know what you're known for. So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
thanks for
That's
rephrasing that.
that's going to
Really
be a
helped.
Yeah, that's gonna be a discussion we'll have at the red carpet experience.
Abs-
Because it's
oh
one
yeah,
thing that I focus on is, it's that whole thing. Are you generalist or you're niche? For me, I've got a passion for helping men. I love men's retreats and those kind of things. But then I'm like, oh, but I also love, impacting not just men, but women as well, right? And
yeah.
so it's one of those things that you're like, oh, you kind of don't want to let go. So that'll be an interesting conversation for us to have.
We will definitely be talking about that.
Sounds good.
Gonna get deep.
Leanne, I wanted to ask you, what's your definition of success these days?
I think I think is like actually living my favorite morning ritual, which is like waking up, having a beautiful night's sleep, having time for a nice coffee in the morning, journaling, being with my family, exercising. And if I can just do that day after day, I would be happy. Um,
Yep.
and then I guess sometimes, if I'm to be a bit more add a bit more to that. It'd be like every now and then just getting like a really kind of kick-ass opportunity that just comes through. Like next week, I'm a big fan of the Brisbane Roar. I've been a fan of them for 20 years, and I'm getting to like MC a gig at one of their business events. And so, like for some other people, that's not a big thing. For me, it's a big thing because it's like my favorite team, and it's kind of like a collision of my favorite worlds. And I love when
Yep.
those kind of popcorn moments
Yep.
enter your inbox. Serendipity popcorn is what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. That's cool. Put
that makes
stuff
life
out into the
fun.
universe and things come back to you.
Yeah, it just makes it more fun, right?
Yeah. In your life, Leanne, who's been your greatest teacher?
Yeah. I would say my dad is for sure, and I've probably picked up some attributes that maybe, just like his punctuality is a big one. He's always jumped into me. It's always better to be 30 minutes early than 5 minutes late. But even as a kid, I'd see him preparing for speeches. I'd see, just everything about him has been, as a role model, has been, and then I'd go back to probably John Webb at Wicked Campers, who was a CEO there, who in
Yep.
terms of, like, later on in my career and how I like to work now. So, yeah, I'd say those 2
Yep.
guys.
And what did John teach you?
Um, Being fearless, about it's okay to
Yep.
repel people, take action, don't think about it so much. Like, and you can actually stretch rules and stretch laws, and people don't really care. There's no referee over your shoulder.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's perfect.
Mm.
And if you could pick the brains of anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Mm. I'm thinking recency bias here, but I'm really loving Ivan Cleary's book, The Coach of the
Yep.
Panthers. Like, there's so much about him. He actually talks about, I don't know if you've read his book, but his first paragraph is around, he puts himself in a moment where he's about to take some antidepressant pills, you know? Yeah,
Wow.
I had no idea. And he talks about how everyone in the world sees him as this calm figure, but underneath the surface, he's anything but. And I think that often relates to even when I facilitate, is you have this mask in the world of, like, you have to for your group to make them feel comfortable, but underneath, like, you're thinking you're like air traffic control. There's so much going on underneath, and so to hear that reflected, in his writing, and then also see how successful he's been with his team was, like, amazing. I'd love to just sit down and talk to him. And I think I would say Jim Rohn would be the
Yep.
other one,
Yeah.
because his audio is like, I play them. I've got the 12-hour audio pack, and if it's like $50 from Amazon. It is worth the investment. I listen to it every year, and it just, everything he goes back to is simple. It just stands the test of time. He would be the other
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Perfect. When you talk about Ivan Cleary and obviously the Penrith Panthers and the amazing feats that they've created, a friend of mine who I interviewed last year was Bill Nelson. I don't know if you know Bill, but he has been a coach, like a performance coach, and helped Penrith since 2020, I think.
Wow.
So go back and listen to his episode. He worked with the Australian Olympic team as a swim coach as well for many years. So he's got a really good, but he was one of my first business coaches when we got into business. He coached us for a couple of years, and phenomenal, authentic, real human being. So he's definitely someone
Oh,
to listen and tune
I'm
into.
I'm going to listen to that. That sounds great. Thank you for sharing
Awesome.
that.
Well, I really appreciate your time today, Leanne. I'm looking forward to connecting, collaborating further with you. For
Likewise.
those that want to reach out to you, that want to, obviously, you've got your podcast, you've got your website, but where can people reach out to you?
There's a million different ways. And look, send me a voice note, because we want to hear your voice. Steve, you voice note me on Instagram. It's kind of fun. So, LinkedIn and Instagram are great places for that. Website,
Yep.
leannehughes.com, and the podcast, Leanne on Demand.
Cool. And we'll drop all those details in the show notes as well when the episode comes out.
Thank you for hosting such a wonderful conversation. It's been so much fun. Like, this isn't
No,
work.
it has
This has
been.
just been really invigorating. So thank you.
Yeah. Anyone watching this has seen I've just been smiling the whole episode. It's been brilliant. I think you have as well. So we knew it was going to be a lot of fun. So many insights and great reflections, and so many great takeaways for people as well. So really grateful, and look forward to jumping on the red carpet soon with you.
Yeah, can't wait. Bring on the camp out. Thanks, Steve.
All right. Thanks, Leanne.